Want to celebrate a milestone in your sobriety? Have a burning desire? Just want to say hi? Call our hotline at 937-203-8330.
Well, I have 7 years of sobriety in AA, continuous. But before that, I was like in and out of the program a lot. I realized
I'm an alcoholic.
I'm an alcoholic.
I am an alcoholic.
I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic.
I am an alcoholic.
I am an alcoholic.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time of day it is for you. I am your alcoholic host. I am Raymond, and I am joined with Emily today. Hello, Emily. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming to Many Paths podcast. Are you, it's always weird asking someone this. Are you a person in recovery? Are you alcoholic? Are you an addict? Or are you?
I'm an alcoholic. I definitely am an addict. There were substances that I became addicted to. So I've only been to one Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I just stick with AA because I know it. I have had multiple addictions, not just alcohol.
Right. So safe to say you're a person in recovery.
Oh yeah, yes.
Okay. I think that's a pretty safe general term nowadays. I find myself the farther I go into recovery, I'm rounding up to 7 months now. I don't think it's just alcoholism. I believe we have addictive personalities, is what I'm finding with myself.
It's really easy to switch into something else. I've seen myself get have addictive patterns, like with shopping. Like I'll get a rush buying things. That never became the I always like keep receipts and I return a lot of things. So that hasn't disrupted my life the way alcohol is, but I can definitely see how addictions can bleed into new addictions.
Right.
I've done that with food. I definitely, especially early in the program, gained a lot of weight, did a lot of late night junk food, eating my feelings. So I do think there is a tendency for people addicted to one thing to wind up getting addicted to something else, or have that habit in general, like you described.
Right. So, we can jump right into it. Do you want to start us off from the beginning, or you can do it like a speaker, or what's more comfortable for you?
I'll I guess just kind of start talking, but please interrupt me at any time. If I'm not sure what your time frame is, but I can just kind of launch into it. I guess it's your call.
It's whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
I'm easygoing.
Okay. Well, I guess there are a couple of things that make my story stand out, or that are kind of more distinctive about my story. One thing is that I'm bipolar, so I come into actually, I didn't know this, but it turns out that many people who become addicted to chemicals, whether alcohol or something else, the vast majority have had depression or anxiety disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, had some major stress in their life, or are bipolar like me or something else. A lot of people familiar with it's almost a stereotype now for post PTSD people. People are familiar with like the vet who becomes an alcoholic to cope with the trauma of being on the battlefield. And if you go to enough meetings, you start hearing a lot of people have anxiety disorder, or grew up in an abusive family, or they were raped, or they have some sort of PTSD, or they deal with depression. So I think there's some overlap there. So part of me getting sober, I had to come to terms with not just the fact that I was drinking too much. I had to face the fact that I was bipolar, which I did not want to admit. I didn't want to admit either of those things. And in order to recover, I had to really tackle those two issues hand in hand at the same time. Because it made my personal recovery trickier because I was dealing with kind of two different things at the same time. I guess I'll just let you ask questions. I'm not really sure.
So, what is there different types of bipolar? Is that a disorder or?
Yeah. So, bipolar disorder. The umbrella term talk about affective disorders. Those are the mood disorders in general. And mood disorders, most people are familiar with depression. You've seen ads on TV. My mood disorder happens to be bipolar. And there are actually 4 different types of bipolar disorder. My particular bipolar disorder is not otherwise specified, meaning it doesn't fall into a neat category of bipolar 1, bipolar 2, or bipolar 3. Anyway, yes, so I deal with depression, but I also then have periods of high energy, of mania, that can cause problems in terms of overindulging in things, not poor impulse control. There are all sorts of things that can happen to people when they get manic. Talking too fast, not sleeping at all, spending a lot of money, taking on new projects. Those are all trademarks of mania. But I take medication. I'm a big believer in, if you have a psychiatrist and you have some sort of disorder, that you take your medication as prescribed. I know there are some kind of older people, I guess, in AA, for example, who are saying, oh, you need to get off all your medications. But that's like telling somebody with cancer, oh, you need to stop your cancer treatment. Anyway, I'm a big believer in taking medications by doctors so that I can manage the bipolar disorder and stay sane and stay sober.
I agree with that point. I mean, most people in the program, not everyone's a doctor, and it's a doctor that prescribes those type of medications and makes those diagnoses. So, someone with a disorder, mental health disorder, no matter what it is, that could be dangerous to that person to tell someone to come off their medication.
Absolutely. It can be deadly. And the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, it says in black and white, we are not doctors, we are not professionals. We make use of trained professionals and trained doctors when it's necessary. It makes it clear we're not medical experts, and that we should rely on somebody who has devoted 7 or more years of their life to getting advanced training to specialize and deal with these things. And yeah, especially I had a friend in AA who was bipolar, and he went off his medication and he ended up killing himself a few weeks after that. So it is, the potential for it to be deadly is a major reality.
Man, that's pretty deep, and that's a lot to think about too. I mean,
yeah.
So
I personally have never had anybody in AA say to me, you need to get off your medications. But I've heard that sometimes happens in certain meetings.
From my little time in AA, I've got to hear good stories, bad stories, ugly stories, a good mix, and some of them's humorous, but it's just we're here to get off alcohol. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is for,
Right.
And I'm kind of stuck. I'm getting stuck here, coming up with this, because by no means I'm no expert. I'm just I'm just now starting to work the steps with another person as
Right.
I have one sponsee, and I've been doing that on a real steep learning curve, and sometimes I get direction from my sponsor.
Yeah, it's I think AA is really useful, and the steps are useful, but the thing always to keep in mind is these aren't like trained professionals, where this is like a group of people trying to do their best to stay sober, trying to help other people get sober. But we're humans and we're flawed, and sometimes people give out advice that they mean well by, but it's not at all helpful. And I've heard this phrase that my friend Mikey says that I think is really useful, is that what helps me might kill you. So one person might find a situation where maybe they are abusing prescription medications, and that person does need to get off those medications. Whereas if you do that to someone who is, for example, bipolar, they can become or depressed. They can end up committing suicide. So I think it's really important to try to not make blanket statements, and I guess have a black and white approach to sobriety. Everyone's program needs to be reasonably flexible and a little bit different.
Right. Yeah. Best way to put it is do what's going to work for you, and don't do stuff that's not prescribed to you, and just take what's prescribed to you. That's probably the safe bet for the moral of this story.
Right. And in general, there's a great phrase that you may have heard in meetings. People say, take what you need and leave the rest behind. So even if we're not talking about prescription drugs, we're talking about someone in a meeting who's being really judgmental. You need to leave that behind. Take the things in the meeting that were really helpful and inspiring to you, but the things that don't feel right, I guess, to take those with a grain of salt or just leave them.
Mm-hmm. So when we began, you're currently 7 years sober right now, correct?
Right.
Did this start in like your with the alcoholism, your younger years? Did it start young? Did you start young or?
Well, looking back, I could see in college, I was, looking back, I had some potential to become a full-blown alcoholic in my 20s in college. At that time, I was really focused on learning. I think that's what saved me. I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed writing papers. So I enjoyed having a clear head. But there were times when I would be done with finals, I would definitely, I was part of the Greek system. I would go to these parties that were really fun, but I wasn't necessarily remembering all the details of those parties. And so clearly, that's a blackout. When you don't remember details of what you did while you were drinking, that's a blackout. And I just kind of wrote it off as, oh, this happens to everybody who drinks. And I didn't take it very seriously. After I graduated from college and started my first job, I was experiencing a lot of depression. And the psychologist I was seeing basically said, she had me fill out some form that asked questions, including basically questions about, what do you remember things when you drink? And I was honest about, oh yeah, sometimes I black out. I'm pretty sure based on the results of that, said, okay, while you're in therapy with me, I don't want you drinking. In part because, well, the main reason is chemically, alcohol is a depressant. If you're going to be getting treatment for depression, you should not be consuming depressants. That's what goes against the entire purpose of trying to get over depression. So I agreed to that, and it was kind of hard and awkward at first, but I was able to do that for a few years. I also then kind of just drinking wasn't a big part of my life because I ended up getting married, and we decided to have a son, or to start having children. So I was pregnant. I didn't drink or smoke pot while I was pregnant or nursing. And then there were the demands of being a mom that kind of, drinking just wasn't a big part of my life. But then I ended up kind of basically, our marriage sort of crash landed, I guess, in Orlando. And we started going through a divorce. I started working at the House of Blues and the concert hall and was serving drinks. And during that period, my alcoholism definitely took off. I was working in the service industry at night. My job was basically to get people drunk for a living. Then after, all the bartenders and cocktail waitresses, we'd all go out together and get drinks next door to unwind. So during that period, my drinking increased exponentially. And then it started becoming a problem that I denied for many, many, many years. before I was willing to go to an AA meeting.
Always starts out as fun, and it starts bringing the problems. Is the
Exactly.
equation? The problems start outweighing the fun.
Yeah.
And then we find ourselves in a situation. What was the breaking point? If what was the breaking point to get you to go to your first AA meeting?
Well, honestly, there were a couple of breaking points or a couple of like big red flags, which I would take seriously and stop drinking for a few days, and then convince myself maybe I'd overreacted. I went to see a doctor, and she noticed I was shaky, and she said, "You have the DTs. You drink too much, and you got I forget exactly what DTs stands for, but you have the shakes, and it's from alcohol, and I want you to cut down to 1 beer a night for a week, and then I want you to stop." And so I was like, oh my God, that's a big deal. So I did stop drinking for a few days. Then I started looking up side effects for my antidepressants. And one of the side effects that was possible was shaking. So I told myself, this doctor is a quack. My shaking is because I've this prescription, and she doesn't know what she's talking about.
You're trying to rationalize the situation. You're
absolutely.
You're like, yeah, this isn't the alcohol. Yeah. So,
yeah, rationalizing, lying to myself. I was insanely good at that for a very long time. I had a coworker at House of Blues say, I remember we were both in the locker room, kind of on a break. I was telling her what I thought was a really funny story. I had met some people the night before. I didn't know who this person was who was calling me. And she said, "You drink too much." And I thought, that's rude. And I continued telling my story. And she said, again, "You drink too much." And then I was like, well, she just doesn't have any sense of humor. And I think I went on, I think it was 3 times she said to me, "You drink too much." And she was a nurse, actually, part-time. And I didn't want to admit that she was onto something. I wanted to continue with using alcohol, which I used it to cope with a bipolar disorder. I used it to cope with the pains of going through a divorce that I did not want to happen. I used it to cope with any unpleasant emotion that I had. And I guess basically my life became progressively worse. The bipolar disorder became really clear that I had it. I ended up walking out of my job that I'd had for over 5 years. I walked out in the middle of a shift. I was having a mental breakdown. It was partly maybe the bipolar disorder, but also partly that I had gotten wasted the night before and I couldn't remember some of the things that had happened, and that freaked me out. So it was kind of at that point, I started doing intensive outpatient therapy, and I started going to AA. But it took a long time for it to take, because I'd been using the alcohol so long to cope with so many things that just stepping away from it entirely, it felt overwhelming to me.
So it was starting AA. I mean, you said it took a few times. So you're at 7 years now. Was there a stint of what you call relapses, or when did it start really? What path what path did you get on that really just started to, you're able to catch a hold on and really start shaping up your own program?
Yeah, so I was in and out of AA for at least 5 years, where I would get sober for maybe 3 months. Then I'd get depressed and use that as an excuse to go to the bar, go out, have a drink. What started happening is progressively, I was putting myself into riskier and riskier situations, hanging out with sketchier and sketchier people. I was doing, I was buying illegal drugs and hanging out with people who were dirtbags. I found myself increasingly, saying, "Oh, I would never do X." And then a few months later, I would be doing X. I would be doing exactly what I said I wouldn't. Then I'd be saying, okay, well, maybe I do this, but I'm never going to do Y. And then a few months later, I would be doing Y. And I said, okay, well, I'm doing Y, but Z, I would never in a million years do Z. And then I would find myself doing things that I swore I never would do. And yeah, it's just one night in particular, I was hanging out with this really sketchy guy in a sketchy house. And he was feeding me increasing amounts of cocaine, basically, and being weird anyway, and controlling. And I knew this guy had a history of domestic violence with his last girlfriend. And I'm like, how am I going to get the help? How am I going to get out of this house in this situation? Somebody dropped by to buy some drugs, thank God. And I used that as an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to the store to get cigarettes and beer. You guys want anything? And they said no, and I was able to leave and go home. And I have never been more wired from cocaine. I'd never done that much in one sitting ever before in my life. And my whole body felt like it was like hyper wired. All I wanted to do was go to sleep, but I couldn't. And I was like, holy fuck, I can't go to sleep. And I ended up staying up all night and getting on my laptop to find out what rehabs would accept my health insurance. And as soon as the rehabs opened up, I started making calls. I got signed up to enter into an outpatient rehab where they specialized in what's called dual diagnosis, meaning they deal with a mental health issue if you have one, and they deal with your addiction if you happen to have both diagnoses. So that was perfect for me. Yeah, and that was, I guess I was just scared shitless by the situation I had gotten myself into that night, and was like, I'm going to die. If I don't get sober, I'm going to die. Or I'm going to end up killing someone while driving. I really just had to get really scared. And before I was willing to face that I had been gambling with my life and other people's lives for a long time.
Man, that's I'm sitting here just thinking about everything you're saying, and it's just like you're like, well, I wasn't going to do this, and then I do it, and it reminds me of the yets. I haven't done
exactly.
This. Then the yets, and then all this started happening, and then like right here at this turning point, it's just like then you're realizing the other yets, and
yeah.
And it's just like, so you go to this program. What comes out of the program with this program going to the dual diagnosis?
Yeah, well, it was really helpful for a couple of reasons. One, so I still had a son, so I couldn't, and he was in high school at this point, and I couldn't, maybe he was in middle school, I'm not sure. I couldn't really say to my ex-husband, I'm going away for 30 days on a vacation and take care of our son. Or I felt like, I guess I could have come up with some excuse, but I felt like I couldn't do that. I was concerned about losing custody. So I had no idea that there were places, rehabs, that did outpatient rehab. This particular place and the program I started, it's at La Amistad in the Winter Park area. It was, in effect, it was like a 9 to 4 p.m. type thing. So all day you're in classes learning about addiction, and all day learning about different mental health disorders and learning coping mechanisms for stress. And I felt like in that month-long period, I gained so much valuable information that was really relevant to me. Being able to tackle the bipolar disorder and the addiction together simultaneously, that saved my life. Before, I had been seeing a psychiatrist who was pretty mediocre, and he was giving me meds to treat the bipolar disorder, but those weren't really working. And then separately, I'd been going to AA and going to traditional AA pretty much, where I was getting told that I had to, my sobriety was riding on my spirituality. And I'm like, well, I'm agnostic. So I'm just trying to straddle these two different worlds. Neither was working very well. And I finally got to a place, a rehab, where I was able to deal with both, people who understood both things. And I gained a ton of information, and I just absorbed and learned anything they had to teach. I was there. I still have my notebook. I have all the workbooks that I did. It was a really life-changing, positive experience that I'm deeply grateful for.
So that you did an outpatient and then you found another.
Well, I found outpatient. So the way and it was also a graduated program. So
Okay.
I'd be there from like 9 to 4 p.m. doing therapy sessions, doing yoga sometimes, learning about cognitive distortions, things that we tell ourselves that are really unhealthy and contribute to depression, stress, shame. I was learning all these healthy coping skills. And then you go from that, then it's a 3 evenings a week program. So you're stepping down gradually, which I also found really helpful, because so many rehabs, you're there 30 days, overnight, 24/7, you're in rehab land with a set of rules and supports. And then at the end of that 30 days, boom, you're done. They release you back into the wild. And you're like, okay, now I have to apply everything I learned, but I don't have ongoing support. So this was perfect. I was spending the night in my own home. I was going to AA meetings on my own in the evenings and on weekends. And then I was able to taper down. So instead of 9 to 4, it was 3 nights a week of going to therapy sessions and whatnot. And I definitely, people talk about recommending doing 90 meetings in 90 days. I did at least 90 meetings in 90 days. I threw myself in.
And that was traditional AA, correct?
Actually, I had, when I went to rehab, I had just discovered, oh my God. So I would go to traditional, and I was going to traditional meetings and agnostic meetings. So I was doing both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're mixing it up.
Yeah, I basically was like, any meeting, I will go to it. I'll whatever they take. I'm not picky, you know. And I like going to a variety of meetings and hearing different points of view.
So at what point did you realize that, like, because you mentioned the agnostic portion. That's what I was trying to get at. So you're using traditional and secular meetings for the path you took to maintain your sobriety. Is where I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, I was these days though. Now that I'm around 5 or 6 years sober, maybe it's the pandemic. I also kind of cut back on the number of in-person meetings. Yeah, kind of when the pandemic happened, I only went to my favorite meetings, which was Oh My God, which is our mostly agnostic group of drunks. So roughly about 2 years, I really just am like, Oh My God and agnostic meetings, that's really my comfort zone. I know the people really well. I like the people a lot. And so that's what I've been doing since the pandemic. At some point in the future, I'm open to going to certain traditional meetings I've been to around town that I like. But really, Oh My God is the one that is closest to my heart. I guess I'll say that.
Yeah. So it doesn't kill you to go to traditional meeting then.
No, it's you know, it's fine. And sometimes people, when they talk about their concept of God, I just think I have no idea what you were talking about, or I think that is not my concept of a higher power.
Right.
So I can sometimes with traditional meetings there can be to me, compared to, I can only speak for our mostly agnostic group of drunks. I find that Oh My God, our mostly agnostic group of drunks is far. Have not encountered the judgmental atmosphere that will occasionally crop up at traditional meetings. Okay. Occasionally there'll be, a lot of people are great, but then occasionally someone will say something and you're like, well, that was kind of mean and not really helpful.
I've ran into it once.
Huh?
I ran into it once when I admitted my own view at a traditional meeting, because I just wanted to get out, because I was doing, I did probably 110, 120 and 90. And I was just like, I need to get out of the house. And I found a local one. I started going to it. It was all right. But then I was just like, same thing, hearing their stuff. And I was just like, well, I'm gonna throw my view of this, and, just admit it. I'm agnostic, atheist. I don't know what I am.
Right.
I'm one day, the other the next. I don't know.
Right.
But, and they didn't really say anything that first week. Then one day they're asking for a topic, and I just brought up a topic and all that for them. And it was then the whole group's looking at me preaching to me for the topic. I was like, well, I wasn't facing this. I was just giving you a topic.
Hey.
And And I shared on it, and I said, "This is how I did." But anyways, it got to this one lady. She looked at me and she goes, "Well, you might be at a disadvantage because you won't grasp a higher power." And da da da. I'm like, I said, I'm doing just fine because I sit and work this out with other alcoholics.
Right.
I was just letting you know my viewpoint, and
Right.
because they stare at me because I don't do the Lord's Prayer and all this other stuff, and
Right.
I don't believe someone's gonna take away my personal defects. And
Right.
I'm a strong believer. I had the willpower to take the first drink, and I had the willpower to put down the last drink, and I got to maintain that and work it out with someone else to maintain not drinking. And don't take your personal defects away. Your defects are your defects. You just learn how to control them.
Right.
That's just my 2 cents in the hat right there. So
Yeah, I mean, I do. I've heard. You may have heard Mikey and Oh My God talk about you can learn to translate things. So you can go to a traditional meeting and you hear someone say, like, someone may even tell you, "Well, just pray on it." And what I do is put it through my auto translator so I don't get annoyed and say, and I think they're saying, just meditate about it and talk about it with other sober people you trust, who you regard as mentally healthy and you like their program.
mm-hmm.
So, but there is a tendency, I think, with Christianity and maybe in general, that people can get judgmental. I think sometimes people are being well-meaning in that their sobriety, that's how they got sober, is they had to really get into God and praying, and that's what helped them. So they think that's what would help you too. But there's also an element sometimes where I feel like that people are almost threatened. Like if you question it, they're worried you're going to undermine their sobriety. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So it's just easier to be at agnostic meetings.
Okay. So did you work at agnostic steps or?
No, kind of. Oh, this is really cool. Considering
Secular steps. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, there's something really cool. There are a sponsor turned me onto this, and oh my God, there are a lot of different varieties of, like, for example, the third step prayer. There's the third step prayer people know from the big book and traditional AA. But if you go online, you can look up Native American third step prayer. And there are 2 different Native American third step prayers that I personally found really meaningful. Is "Oh Great Spirit," whose spirit I feel in the breeze. It's basically connecting with your higher power through nature. And I thought, well, that's really cool. I dig that. I like getting out in nature and feeling positive and connected with the universe. I can do this Native American prayer. There are also like Wiccan third step prayers. There are Buddhists. There are ones that are totally secular. There's just a lot of variety out there. You just kind of have to know where to dig for it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I did largely, I used a work. Actually, one of the most helpful things when I did my steps was I used these workbooks from, let's see, Hazelden Press. They make supplemental workbooks to do the steps, and I used that. That was helpful. So I did definitely. I guess in effect, I kind of did my own version of the steps with little Native American stuff thrown in. And my sponsor, who was Christian, was totally down with that.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's the first for me to hear. The first one that was different for me was Stoicism.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting philosophy.
Well, I think that wouldn't work for me because I think that's what got me where I ended up being that way.
Yeah, I don't really know much about Stoicism.
Well, I was a very emotionalist person for the longest time towards my wife and my children, and sometimes just felt like I don't know, that alcohol, and I was a police officer for 18 years and everything else, and it was just like I just started thinking about things, and I'm just like, this is probably why I have this attitude. This is why I act that way. And I started reading about Stoicism, and I go, this isn't going to work for me, because that's kind of like how I was already acting, because I acted like things didn't affect me. It's kind of like...
you were repressing your emotions.
Yeah, that was the big thing for me, and that's what got me in trouble, And
I gotcha. Yeah.
So it's like, but it's so amazing, and this is why I want to do this. You just brought something up I hadn't even thought about looking up, and you know what? Someone might look this up and use that now. And I never even thought of a Native American version of that, and I know there's a lot of alcoholism within the reservations and the Native American community, from what I understand.
Well, you can Google. I actually came across. Yeah, I had a sponsor who said who was in Oh My God, the agnostic group, who said, okay, so you're kind like, where are you at in terms of spirituality, higher power? I kind of told him where I was at. He said, you might check out the Google Native American third step prayer. Because I think, based on what you said, that would be a good fit for you. I currently have a sponsor who is Wiccan. I don't know much about the whole Wicca movement, but I Googled and looked up for her. I found they've got Wiccan AA prayers.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about that whole religion approach to spirituality, but it works for her. I don't really understand. Yeah, I don't understand the details, but it seems her sobriety is awesome, and it's a really great spiritual practice for her. So I think it's important to be really open-minded when you're sponsoring people or talking to people who are trying to get sober and stay sober, that you find out where they are at and meet them there.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because the trying to twist people around to your point of view, that's, I don't think that's helpful.
No, because from my understanding, alcoholics are, what is it? Egomaniac, self-centered assholes, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
And we will, what we think is not exactly what they're going to see eye to eye. And,
yeah, as alcoholics, someone says, you've got to, when I would hear that in meetings, I think any alcoholic, you've got to do this, this, and this. Maybe that works for some people, but I think for me personally and many other people, we say, well, you know what you've got to do. like, you've got to piss off. You know,
Right.
I think meeting people where they are and keeping the focus on whatever helps them get sober, that's always the healthy approach, instead of trying to push your viewpoint, your worldview on another person. It's not really about that. It's about guiding them where they are at. So
you opened up a bunch of pathways today, and I'm just smiling ear to ear right now. It's just that's what this is about, and I think you're going to really inspire someone with this episode. You've made my day. You've really made my day. I really appreciate you being part of my recovery today.
Thank you. That's very nice of you.
And
yeah, I was psyched when I found this website that was like listed 10 different versions of the third step prayer. And I was like, holy crap, I had no idea.
Yeah, shoot that. Shoot me some links over or whatever you let me put in the show notes, and I will. And
I don't think I could find it again.
Oh, well, maybe I'll dig around and I'll throw them in there for you. All right, final thoughts. Any personal advice? Anything else like that?
It's really good to be sober. I remember when I was relapsing a lot, somebody wrote in this AA book, don't leave before the miracle happens. And I was like, yeah, I don't really believe a miracle is going to happen for me. But the fact that I am living a happy, clear-headed, sober life is a freaking miracle. And I'm just deeply grateful for this, deeply grateful for the program, and thank you for talking with me.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Please help us. Help others that are in need of help. Subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other platform you can.